This is our today and next Sunday, we're doing a series called This Is My Story. And we've got 4 different people who are going to be sharing their stories, 2 this week and 2 next week. So I'm glad that you're here, getting to hear how God is at work in the lives of so many different people. So enjoy that. And hopefully this is something we'll be doing occasionally. So if that's something you're interested in doing and sharing your story, come talk to me, or I'll find you later next time we do that. And we'll get to hear all about your story as well.
So I'm a baby boomer, and back then alcohol was a thing. And the last 2 years of high school, I drank a lot, and 5 years afterwards. And I lived at home, paid my rent, always had a job, always worked, and just, functional person. And without, well, I understood once it happened. It took me years to figure it out, but I was probably a day and a half getting over the last one. And 3 things, when I came out, the 3 things came at me all at the same time. Can't really describe it. Has anybody else witnessed Christ in their lives here? Just an amazing thing. First thing I knew was something major happened in my life. The next thing I realized all at the same time was I didn't do anything. And also, it must have been a higher power, obviously. And I was never into reading Bible studies or anything back there in the church. And, but that kind of works on my inside. And over the years, I'm off track. So when I woke up and I came out of it, alcohol was gone. You can't explain it. It was a fact. Something major happened in my life. I didn't do it, and it was a higher power. So I started looking into all of it, and the more I read, I mean, it's obviously that Christ saved me. When it comes right down to it, I brought my Bible in to read my version of faith works. I'm living proof. Faith works. There's a lot to throw into it. I mean, all what I put my parents through all these years, and some people remember my mother. But the good thing is that she saw me come full circle. She saw me come out of it. And I thank God for that. That's to put your parents through that, but then to see how you turned out through it. So I'm going to read out of my Bible, 8 through 10. You were saved by faith in God, who treats us much better than we deserve. Wow, huh? This is God's gift to you. I mean, man, there's so much right there. And nothing you've done on your own. I tried to explain that way back to Anne Marie. And it's a hard thing to get out and have people understand what you're trying to get at, This is something you've earned, nothing you can brag about. It's God's gift. God plans for us to do good things and live as He was always wanted us to live. That's why Christ sent us to make us what we are. And so with that little nugget, I continued on in life, always worked, job and a half, 2 jobs, and just, my chin's been up, and I've just been fighting along. And just knowing that 2 or 3 lines has helped me out in my life so much. Nowhere's near 10 minutes on. Any questions? I got thrown off.
That's all right.
I got thrown off. So that's my story.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you, Deborah.
Mine is not a story of a born-again story or a story of one who has never known God or Jesus Christ. Mine is a story of how Jesus Christ has been with me and helped me in my life. Since I was a child, I was drawn to spirituality. I felt I had a calling. I was brought up in a Catholic church. We went to church every Sunday, holy days of obligations. I remember as a child just going into church and visiting. We said grace every day before our meals. I did my rosary, attended catechism classes. I remember in high school, my brother and I went to a movie that was geared towards teenagers. And I think it was a Billy Graham movie, and there was a calling to come up front. And I went up front. And they gave me a booklet to bring home to study. But back then, as a Catholic, I did wrong, and my mother let me know I did wrong, and that's as far as that went. When I was in nursing school, the last year before I went back to school for the summer, I went to my girlfriend's camp. And while I was laying down, I heard two friends talking about how they could save this particular person. And I walked out and said, "You can save me." And they handed me a Bible, and they said, "Open it up and read the first thing you see." And this, "Come unto me, all you that are labored and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and you shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." I immediately went out and I bought my first Bible. And this is that Bible. And the date in it is August 28th. What is today? August 28th. For a week or so, I felt elated. I felt like, Christ was in my life. But school started up and all that went away. I'll get back to that in a minute. But so I am known as a GTS. Does anybody, Jane probably knows what this is. Anybody know what a GTS is? Well, I'm a goody two-shoes. And being goody two-shoes has a different connotation depending on who is calling you it. I think it was my oldest son, Brian, that actually first gave me that label. And when he calls me a goody two-shoes, it's a compliment. It means I strive to do right, that I'm kind and forgiving. Now, if my sister Leanna calls me a GTS, it has a negative connotation. I always try to see the good in people before I see the negative, and always try to find a reason why they are the way they are. And I'm a rule follower, and at times I think she thinks that I think I'm better than anybody else. But my reasons for being a GTS, a rule follower, a person who demands perfection of herself, and I often have to remind myself that when God created the world, he looked at his creation and he said, "It is good." He didn't say anything about perfection. But I demanded perfection of myself, and I need to be able to visualize any successes in order to be able to carry them through. Partly that came from my Catholic upbringing. And Catholic upbringing is you're based on fear. You're taught that the way to heaven is to do good and to be without sin. And also because of the way I was treated by my mother. She was very strict and controlling and awfully hard on me. My life consisted of getting up in the morning, doing chores, going to school, which was a struggle, coming home to do ironing, watching siblings, helping with dinner, doing the dishes, getting siblings ready for bed, and hopefully there was time for homework before I was in bed by 9 o'clock. My chores had rules and time limits, and there were consequences if those expectations weren't met. I knew what a slap across the face, a wooden spoon, fly swatter, and the buckle end of a leather belt against that bare flesh felt like. Anything I did was never good enough. I was told I was a liar, a cheat, and I would never amount to anything. And I was threatened with reform school. Why, I don't know. I couldn't share any of these things with anyone, because the rule in our house was anything that is said and done in this house stays in this house. And if I had gotten wind that I talked to anybody, I'd be in trouble before. I felt really unloved. I remember a neighbor and my aunt, they went away after school. And I can remember as a child feeling joyous when they came home. I couldn't wait to see them. And I thought, boy, if I go away, maybe that's what will happen. So I went away to nursing school. I left in August, and before I left, my mother informed me when I come home, nothing would change. George would still be there. In October, when I came home for the first time, everyone was sitting around the dinner table. And first thing I heard was, "You're washing dishes tonight." And things were copacetic. It was a time of going to school, was a time of great depression and struggles. Looking back now, I should never have finished nursing school. I shouldn't have been there in the first place. But to leave was a sign of failure, and my mother would have been so right. And not many people, nobody knows this, not even my parents, but just towards the end, my senior year of nursing school, I was going to be told to leave. And I broke down in tears and crying, and Sister Consuelo offered to call my parents. I don't know if they saw the fear, but anyway, I was allowed to stay. And I bet they were totally surprised when I passed my boards. Anyway, if I left school, what would happen? I'd be again a sign of failure. And what would I do when I went home? I couldn't visualize myself doing anything. I'd be under my mother's thumb. So in February of '69, my friends talked me into going to a dance. St. Francis College, which is an all-boys school, is held where UNE is right now. And they would send a bus to pick up warm-blooded ladies to bring us to the dance. And I was talking to going, and I went, and I decided I was going to have a good time, and I was going to dance with the first person who asked for the dance, no matter what. Well, John, my husband, asked me to dance. He's just an ordinary looking guy, and I said, "Promise is a promise." Well, 51 years later, we're still together. I believe now God was God sent. But recently I wondered, why would God send me a non-Christian? Last week I was read to read the synopsis of the book Isaiah, and God commanded the prophet Isaiah to marry Gomer, a prostitute. There is hope yet for my husband. John was my rock. If it was for him, I was sure I would not be here today. I used to think about stepping off the curb in front of a truck. He listened to my troubles, was supportive and encouraging. He loves me just as I am. He saw the good in me, stood up and defended me to my parents, and he gave me my voice. And often now he says, "Where is that meek, mild little girl I used to marry?" And I said, "Your fault, you gave me my voice." When I left home, I was not going to church. I didn't go back to church probably until my son was, Ryan, it was time for catechism class. And he went to catechism class and made his first communion. I went to church, the Catholic church, for about a year. But I always never felt welcome. No one ever greeted me. No one ever said hello to me. I felt totally alone, and I stopped going. I suffer from depression, from which I take medications. There were many times I lived feeling sorry for myself, playing the lowest me, feeling underappreciated and taken for granted. There are times when I didn't know if I wanted to live my life the way it was going, meaning I didn't know if I wanted to continue my marriage the way it was, but I did not have the courage to change. I heard a minister once say recently, "Satan will defeat you when he isolates you and gets you alone." Is that what was happening to me? In 1995, my nephew came to live with us, and he was a church-going boy, and I told him that I would go to church with him on Sunday. But that Sunday came, and he didn't want to go, and I felt I'd made a promise to God So I went. And right off, I knew what was missing in my life. I sat the first 2 Sundays on the second row on the right-hand side in tears. I started going regularly and became committed. I attended Bible studies, took on many roles within the church family. I learned much about how God and Jesus were working in my life. In the summer of '96, I was rebaptized. I had been baptized as a child, but I wanted to make that commitment myself. And I was baptized at my friend Arlene's camp, Pocket Lake. I had a revelation. I was reading the book of Prayer of Jabez. And I remember calling Pastor Dan the next morning, and I said, it's not the Prozac that's making my life better, it's Jesus Christ. I used to pray to God that if my mom and I could not have a mother-daughter relationship, could we at least be friends? And I remember one June, I called her. I always told her I loved her. I don't care what had just happened, but I told her I loved her every night as a child going to bed. And I always told her I loved her. I didn't want to hurt her feelings, let her know anything different. But it was her birthday, and I told her I loved her. And for the first time, I felt I really did love her. And I went to her, and I said, Mom, there's no secret. Our relationship was kind of testy growing up. We didn't have the best life together. But I don't want to go back and harp on those things. I just want you to know I love you, and I just want to go forward. And I do believe I became her favorite daughter. But because of my personal relationship with Jesus Christ, I could forgive and love, and that was the greatest gift. But the pastoral leadership at Bar Mills Community Church changed, and it wasn't a good fit for me. So after 25 years, I left. First I went to a Catholic church, and again, I found, although I was alone, the priest was nowhere to be seen. So then I started attending Pleasant Hill Church, and I attended there for about a year, going to Bible studies. But August 10th, it was a downward spiral. As I left the lake, my place of sanctuary, I stopped at Maine Medical to visit George Parrish, only to learn that he had died. George and Jane are incredibly special to me. They opened their home and hearts to me to listen to my woes on more than one occasion. In September, my mother-in-law took ill and had to be hospitalized, which meant my father-in-law could not be alone. So I stayed with him until we found some independent nights, and then we got him into respite care. And while in respite care, he passed away. My mother-in-law would come to live in our apartment. We set up in our home. In October, I made many trips to deal with my mother's medical issues. She was now at a nursing home. At 2 a.m. in the morning, in November, Friday morning, I received a phone call. My mother had a massive stroke and was on life support. So we took her flying run up to Old Town. And if I had been there, she would not have been put on life support. I was her end-of-life directive, and that she would not have wanted that. But I was going to go back on Monday, and the decision was going to be made whether she should come off life support. And I know my family would have but me, but I would have had to make that decision. Thank God I didn't have to. The hospital, I can't remember why, took her on life support, and she continued to breathe on her own. And I thank God I didn't have to do that decision. I stayed with her for 4 days and kept vigil, and she passed away on Thanksgiving morning. So in that 3-month period, I took on many responsibilities to care for my father while he was in the home until he went to respite. I organized a celebration of his life. I settled my mother-in-law in, taking her to doctor's appointments. I did for her whatever she was unable to do. My mother had made me be the one to organize her funeral, and I became focused on making sure that it was exactly what she wanted. I remember talking to the priest saying at the funeral, I'd like to talk about how if it wasn't for my relationship with Jesus Christ, because of my relationship, I was able to forgive and love my mother. But that was not appropriate, I was told. In fact, no one was going to be allowed to speak at my mother's funeral. When we first went to meet him, he gave us this book, and we were supposed to read it, pick out. Well, I'm the only one that had time to read that book. He called me, or he sent his little deacon to call me, and at that time I found out no one was going to be talking at my mother's funeral. And I couldn't understand it. I broke down in tears. My brother was very upset. He grabbed the phone and let the priest know in no uncertain terms they would be talking. So I'm sitting in the corner crying my heart out. My sister Terry comes to me. We're staying at my brother's house. And she started expounding on the evils of the Catholic Church. And I said, not now. So she went away. And then she came back and told me I would did nothing but mean to her ever since she came. And I lost it. I became a screaming banshee. I pulled out the directive and told her that I was in charge. I've never done that. My brother came and threatened to kick me out. I left anyway. I have felt guilty for a long time about that. I remember calling the pastor at Pleasant Hill. He wasn't much help. There was no follow-up later on in how I was doing. I felt abandoned by my church families and God, so I left church. I was also unable to read anything spiritual, and I openly avoided reading anything spiritual. 10 years would pass, and I would walk into the church to attend the visiting hours of Jim Dunn. And I immediately felt this is where I was supposed to be. Pastor Chuck was walking up the aisles, greeting everybody, and he said hi to me, and he continued up. And then he came back and tapped me on the shoulder, and he said, you know, Deborah, you're always welcome back. I think he had been talking to Jane Garrett, because she was good. That Sunday, I walked into church, and who was at the door to greet me but Pastor Chuck, saying, I told you I'd be here when you came. How would he have known that? To me, that was a message that I was where I was supposed to be. I realized how much I missed the church, and there was a desire to return. Anyway, I began to attend Sunday services on a regular basis, and I was always greeted warmly. But I was determined I was going to be an attendee only. I was not going to sign on the dotted line that I was a member of the Barn Mills Community Church. I still had my guard up, but God's not finished yet. And I remember the Sunday Pastor Dave talked about he was going to have a calling forward and we're going to sign up who was going to be members. And I went into a panic. And I would talk to him, I don't think I can do that. And he so assured me, he was okay, it's okay. And anyway, I lost my We'll get back to that. Anyway, Dave came into our lives, and I loved how David's put a personal touch on the sermons, and he talked in language that's understandable. And I soon identified with what he spoke about, and I started attending Bible studies, and I couldn't wait to go to church on Sunday to listen to the rest of the story. I began to realize just exactly how God was working in my life on a regular basis. It's been a long time since I felt the self-pityness play out. My marriage is in the best place it has ever been. It has become easier to openly express my faith, to hear God's messages to me when I'm on the wrong path and I needed to change. This summer, I felt my heart hardened. I have an uncle who's only 2 months older than I always visited him. I always called him on his birthday. He never reciprocated. This summer, I sent him a text message. It said it was read. He didn't respond to me, and I decided, okay, that's it. You can't have anything to do with me. I'm not having anything to do with you. And I told my sister Laura that. She said, Deb, that's so unlike you. I did Bible study still via phone. Wanda would call me on speakerphone at 9 o'clock in the morning, and we were doing a study on I Am the Good Shepherd. And a voice came to me and said, Deborah, how can you profess to be a Christian and be like that? I immediately went to visit my uncle. Turns out he never got my text message. I sent it to the wrong number. So I thanked Jesus again for talking to me and letting me hear and act on what to say. I learned that nothing I could have done, no distance that I put between me and God would separate me from God's passion and love for me. My heart began to be open to hear God speaking to me and how he is working in my life. I listened to a minister on YouTube recently and said, don't be complacent, content where you are. If you suffer from anxiety and depression, you need to get to church. You need to be actively involved in a community of believers. And being active means you need to go to church 4 Sundays a month, not one. Attend Bible studies, etc. I needed to be among a family of believers, people of faith. During this time, I also prayed about my determination not to sign on the line, about being a member of our North Community Church. What was holding me back? Was there a good reason I couldn't do that? Well, I took a big leap of faith. I am now a signed member of the Margaret Community Church. I would like to leave you in a prayer that came from one of our Bible studies. Lord, you know how easily you are troubled. You know us through and through. You understand thoughts before they enter our mind, hear our words before they left our tongue. You are marvelous. You love us. You are with us. Help us to remember when our life is turned upside down and we feel trouble, that you are greater than our troubles. Give us the grace to express our continued trust in you, who you are, what you have done, and how you are working in our lives. We praise you, thank you. Thank you, but because of you have already set us free, we look up to you, and you are always making all things new for us. Thank you.
As you go this week, as we reflect on their Doug and Deborah stories, reflect on your own story, how God has been at work in your life through the highs and lows to draw you closer to Him and allow others to be drawn to Him through your life.